Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are back with Cars Casually. Today, we're talking about transmissions. This is a discussion that started on Father's Day and even before because I'm teaching my kids how to drive manual transmissions, and most people think there's no need. My kids like it, at least one does. So cool. With us today are the usual suspects. We've got Paula, we've got Nix, we've got Den floating around as a voice. It is bad weather, so we may or may not have people come in as they are able to. So today we're going to discuss, do we still want to teach people to drive a manual transmission, or do we just go automatically to the far more popular automatic transmissions? For our purposes, we're going to define the automatic transmission as a transmission without a clutch pedal. Please understand that that is not the only definition. There are clutchless manuals which act differently. There are continuously variable transmissions like CVTs, and there are dual clutch transmissions, which are technically more like manuals than automatics. In our case, because we're talking about how to teach someone, we're just going to limit it for the most part until we digress about whether or not that clutch pedal is what we teach. So there we go. We're going to start with Paolo. Paolo, you know how I feel. How do you feel? Should we be teaching people manual transmissions?
Uh, this is a very hotly debated topic.
That means you're going to
I
disagree with me, aren't
understand,
you?
just for the sake of discussion. Yeah. Well, personally, I learned how to drive first with an automatic. So this is back when, even before getting my student driver's license, I learned how to make simple turns, how to park parallel, backwards, basically how to maneuver steering wheel. I learned with an automatic. But as soon as I was old enough to apply for a student driver's license, I enrolled in a driving school. I got like the simplest package, which was like a 10-hour driving package, just to learn how to drive a manual. Because by that time, I already knew the basics of turning, how to look at my mirrors, how to reverse. So I just needed to learn how to work with a stick shift. I mean, if you look at the cars available nowadays, if you look at the brand new cars available, less and less cars are equipped with manual transmissions, except for like economy or regular cars. For example, like the Vios cities. If you look at the most basic variants of those cars, you can still find manual transmissions. So I don't believe it when people say that the manual is dying. It's just that they're less and less visible nowadays because automatic transmissions or versions of the automatic are becoming more attainable for people. You don't have to go for the highest variant anymore to be able to drive an automatic.
Okay.
Personally,
Nix,
I
your
still
thoughts?
believe. Yeah, you go for next first.
Okay. Based on experience, I found it way easier to teach people how to drive manual after they know how to drive with an automatic already for like a year or two, compared to teaching someone from like scratch, like from zero. It's because like when you try to teach someone driving, it's separate pa from teaching how to drive manual, and then it's separate from teaching them how to drive on the road. So when you're trying to teach someone and trying to cram all that information together, they get scared pretty easily, and
Okay,
it
next.
becomes a steep hill. It becomes a
Okay.
steep hill in terms of like information on what to teach them. Because
Okay.
I started from a club car, so the first thing I learned was road etiquette.
Mhm.
And then
Okay.
when I started driving like for my dad to like the hospital and back, I learned then how to deal with other people on the road. And then like Paulo, parang when I started to learn how to drive manual, it was like we got the simplest package of 10 hours.
Yeah.
So all I parang so I had 10 hours of just learning how to drive manual. Compared to others, that small package, if to learn all three aspects, it's really difficult.
I think
Okay.
next just described the whole thing for me. I agree on that one. That's how
Yeah,
I
okay.
learned.
Okay, that makes sense, especially in modern. You're more concerned about having them drive safely on the road as opposed to working the manual transmission. That makes complete sense.
I guess the bigger question is should the regular person still learn how to drive manual? I think that's the more
Okay, okay.
heated topic.
Well, what do you think, Nix?
Oh, because for the car people out there, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think that people shouldn't, like, if you don't have to, you don't need to. Because for me, the fact that just throwing a number, like 90% of cars nowadays are automatic, especially the new cars. Like, I don't see the need to learn how to drive manual anymore.
I tend to agree with Nix. I have a lot of friends, batchmates from high school and college. They didn't bother learning how to drive a manual anymore. And the general reason is that they tell me they don't even have a manual car anymore. So
Yeah.
what's the point? And like I don't want to be that kind of car guy who like puts them down. Oh, you're not a real driver, or
Oh my
you're
god,
not
yeah.
like you don't have to drive a manual. I never wanted to be that guy. But practically, personally, for example, if like my brother, my younger brother, he's a sophomore in college. I'm teaching how to drive in an automatic, but eventually I want him to at least know how to operate the manual, because I always have this belief that in emergency cases, like for example, if he's on a trip with his friends and his friend's car is a manual and he has to drive, I want him to at least know how to get home.
Oh, that's true. Okay, in fairness to that,
Uh,
yeah.
That's true. Okay.
yeah,
For that event, you never know. Like, they're in a road trip, and like his friend who knows how to drive manual's tired na. At least he can jump
yeah,
in, and
That's true.
it's not hard. Like, the average time to teach someone who knows how to drive manual, I'll give it within 30 minutes to an hour. Like, they'll know how and be okay
yeah,
with it, not driving manual.
yeah. That's how I took it when I learned how to drive manual, because I was already familiar with how to turn, how to use my mirrors. So
Mm-hmm.
I just focused on the clutch and the gear lever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a day for me, but of course it could be different for different people.
Others, yeah, yeah. But it's
Okay.
nice to have on your like a list of knowledge. But for me, not a requirement.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
So
about you, Parag?
in the modern world, what we're saying is that we don't necessarily need, or it's even advantageous in most cases to teach someone how to drive a manual.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was talking with someone, and I was trying to explain automatic transmissions, because people just assume, as we have defined them, that if there's no clutch,
Yeah.
it's automatic, and that's not necessarily the case. And there are differences within the automatics already. Now, if we okay, you don't necessarily need to know a manual starting out, but it's a good thing to have in your toolbox when it's needed. Then let's talk a little bit about the differences in automatic transmissions. In the beginning, we used to say that automatics were more expensive. Automatics used more fuel. That was a function of the fact that there were inefficiencies. The connection between the clutch and the gears and so on, the the connection point was more smooth and more consistent with manuals. Whereas automatics, it was kind of slushy. There was a loss
Yeah.
of
It's correct.
friction. There's a loss of
Mhm.
torque. That's why automatics tended to be less efficient fuel wise and less efficient transmission of power wise for race cars, for example. However, that has changed. We're not talking about sloppy transmissions, hydraulics anymore. We're talking about different types of transmissions. You have the traditional automatic transmission, which before would be 2 or 3 gears, right? Or maybe four. And now, like, Nix has a new, and I didn't realize this until someone actually asked me to help them understand a fleet purchase. And Nix's pickup truck is a 6-speed transmission. So it doesn't just limit itself to high or low or D1, D2. He can choose to put the range anywhere capping all of the 6 gears. So it is effectively, it's a fairly sophisticated automatic. It's arguable that it's arguable that it provides the same things as a manual, but there are transmissions that do, which are, as an example, we're going to jump into the dual clutch transmissions, which I like very much when they're done well. A dual clutch transmission has no clutch pedal. It does, however, activate kind of more like a manual than it does an automatic. In other
Yeah,
words,
like if you look at the construction of dual clutch
yes,
transmission, it's like a mirror image of, or not mirror. It looks like
yes,
manual transmission compared to
correct,
when you see an automatic transmission. It's big, it's bulky.
correct. So, whereas most people will say that a DCT, dual clutch transmission, is an automatic, in reality, it is more like a manual. It's just computer supported, which makes everything tighter. Okay.
Yep.
So there, and then you have the CVTs,
CVT.
continuously variable transmissions, which we understand as it's basically like a cone with a pulley and a belt.
Yeah.
Okay, and within those two things can move, or the belt can move, and that gives you any possible ratio.
Yeah. And
You-
in terms of fuel efficiency with cars, that's the most, like, as of now, that's like the most efficient implementation.
Well,
Like to the point, if I'm not mistaken, when Petron did a fuel challenge, and I was there. One of the cars that won was the CVT of the Suzuki Celerio over the manual by like 2 kilometers per liter, 3. So
Yeah.
we're already seeing that CVTs are outperforming manual transmissions when it comes to efficiency. For the simple reason that when it's gotten so good, it removes human error
Yes.
with the manual transmission.
Yeah, basically the computer is doing the efficiency thinking for you, and as we've said this before, the gains we are now having in efficiency are more to do, if the engineers that tell us this, it has more to do with the transmission, because the transmission is now able to eke out all the power out of these
Yes,
small 3-cylinder 1.5-liter engines, turbocharged and everything. But we could never do that with a manual, really, because it'd be a mess. The CVT in this case will outperform a manual, and when we're seeing that even with the PDKs and the dual clutch transmissions and the Tiptronics of Porsche before, even on the sporty side, a good automated, I don't want to say automatic, automated transmission will outperform what we as human beings can do. It will accelerate faster and so on. There is a thing though now, which is when we did the media, the challenge, the fuel economy challenge, in that case, they were pitting a CVT, which is actually honestly a fairly rudimentary CVT at that point, versus a manual. We're now finding that if you want to call it that, the top tier of the transmission ladder is the dual clutch transmissions.
Oh yeah.
And we're finding that if everybody, well, you may not remember this, but way back we had these really, really sloppy rubber bandy CVTs, which the feel was lousy, but the efficiency was great. Then they started inputting what buyers were more used to, which is those steps. Which and there's a point, but there's an argument that they're completely artificial anyway. Both have their value, but we're now seeing that the CVTs tend to go to the less powerful engines, and the DCTs, dual clutch transmissions, tend to go to the more powerful engines. That is changing because, and we really like Subaru the way they did this, because they have particular engines and they've matched their CVTs quite well with them, such that I don't care anymore for their cars.
Yeah,
for most of their cars.
And I'm glad you brought up that point, because at least before, the CVTs were like exclusive only to small engines, small cars, because it could only take so much power, leaving the traditional automatics to like the SUVs and pickups, and the dual clutch transmissions to performance oriented automatic. Like using the term loosely, it was for automatics but performance oriented. So the Porsches and cars like that. But now I think the forerunner for strong CV, quote unquote strong CVTs is Subaru, because they have pretty strong engines, and
Yeah,
yet they're
yeah,
still using CVTs,
yeah.
which like
They were
got
the
me
ones.
thinking, like, will there be a day where we see CVTs on SUVs, big SUVs with a lot of torque? That'll be an interesting thing to see.
That'll be. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to talk to an engineer and find out how they're able to do that. Which I think I'm actually supposed to meet with Subaru, so maybe we can. But no, it's just interesting because Subarus are very, very driver-oriented cars. So it was a real
Yeah.
daring move for them to go CVT, but they did, and it worked.
Paolo, have you driven a Subaru? A CVT na Subaru lately?
I've
Yeah.
driven the XV.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong engine. That's a 2
Yeah,
liter
Yeah,
turbo. How did it
yeah.
feel for you?
yeah.
Like as a car,
I didn't
not
even
regarding,
feel like it didn't feel like what people criticize CVTs on.
diba? Like it's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's an enjoyable drive.
Because I have a 2006 Honda Jazz, and it's CVT, and like it's like I love it, but I forgive it for its the slushy CVT. No, because it's like
It's one of
when
the
I'm driving
yeah.
it, diba? It's like it's an econo car, so parang you have a
Yeah,
certain level of expectation, diba? I
yeah,
still
but it's
think it's
also
a
an econo car from quite a while
time.
ago. That's the thing.
Yeah, but
Um,
when you drive the XV or the Forester, it's like, wow, these are
yeah,
CVTs. Are you serious?
yeah. I remember when we
Uh,
chose the Legacy, right? The CVTs were not where we wanted them to be. So I'm fine with an old clunky Neanderthalic, if you want to call it, transmission compared to the modern ones. I'm fine with it. But modern transmissions, no.
They're getting somewhere. They're getting.
Yeah, yeah, and they're better than we are. We had this discussion. We should rethink how we define transmissions because we can't call them. They really can't call them automatics anymore. You
Yeah.
know.
mhm.
Um,
Well, I have a question. Given that there are CVTs, DCTs, and the traditional automatics, what kinds of tips would you give a new driver
Oh, that's a good
uh, with
question.
respect to these transmissions? Like for
So
example,
okay.
I would hear
Mm.
that if you're driving a DCT, you shouldn't leave it on neutral. You shouldn't leave it on drive if you're in a stoplight.
For the
I don't
older
know if
ones,
that's true.
yes. No, for the older ones,
Okay.
yes. But that's a very good question. So, like for the listeners out there, it at least for me, I find it important that if you own an automatic car, you should know whether it's a CVT, a traditional automatic, or a DCT, because driving, like parang to take care of them, you'll have to do things differently. So, like what Paolo mentioned, parang like what do you do if you're driving a CVT? What can you do? With DCTs kasi, especially the older ones, you cannot inch your way through traffic. You know that style of like driving in heavy traffic, that you're inching your way through it. With
okay,
DCTs, you can't. Older,
why do you
especially the
why do you
older
say
ones.
that, Nix? What's
No,
your experience that makes you say that?
okay, because I don't want to name the brand because it's gonna.
Okay, because I don't think that at all, but I think that's a function of how badly somebody made a DCT.
Yeah, I agree that. That's like the older, not well
Nah,
engineered
dude, it's not
DCTs,
age. They just did a bad job. Sorry, they really did a bad job.
and
There
they
was an
still do.
award-winning engine and a really, really bad and just to get and okay, here's the example. We're not going to mention which car company this is, but they had an award-winning engine, 1.5 liter engine or something, and but to get that thing to work, they had to build a transmission to get all the numbers they wanted. And the problem was the transmission was a horrible thing to drive. And in my opinion, they should have gone with a CVT because it would have been better. This thing was terrible, and this is the problem that Nix had. I don't see that
Mm.
problem at all because I wasn't testing that car as my first DCT. I was testing very, very well sorted out performance cars. So I have zero issue with being able to
Yeah.
creep
Oh,
forward.
okay.
It's
I'll
this.
take my statement back.
No,
You're
no, no.
right.
You have a complete. You're correct,
No, no.
Nix, in the sense
I no,
that
no. I'm not
most
correct.
DCTs. No, no, you're right. You're right. In the sense that most DCTs that people would drive, were that bad at that time because that was the only thing available.
Yeah.
Completely correct.
No, that's correct. Because no, I said a
Yeah.
while ago that older DCTs, but if you drive a older Porsche DCT, it's like that's not bad at all.
No, they
It's not
shut
by
the.
age, so I take that back.
No,
It's not by
it's
it's
not.
not
It was
the
it was a
age.
marketing choice by people who
Yeah,
should have known
yeah,
better.
yeah. So I take my
Sorry.
statement back. No, but okay, but going back, we digress there. But
That's
going
fine.
back, yeah, not going back. So for example, I know some people are like, oh, because it's CVT, you cannot inch your way through traffic. It's like, no, actually you can. It's the DCTs that are not well engineered that you can't do that. You'll end up with transmission problems over and over again because of its nature. It like going back. DCTs are basically manual cars that are controlled by a computer, and so if you don't program it well or program it right, it's really going to take a toll on the quote unquote manual transmission.
Yeah.
And like CVTs, they're built for that.
Well, we just got to be very careful with that because it really comes down to the brand handling the transmission and the brand
Yeah.
handling what they're doing. I see zero issue with the properly built dual clutch transmissions. To
Definitely.
explain what dual, let's do a little thing. If the dual clutch transmission, what that does is allows fairly instantaneous shifts. It could be imperceptible if they decided to make it that way. Dual clutch meaning you've got two clutches that are engaging or non-engaging a particular gear. What that means is that at one point, one gear is ready to go, and one gear is running, the other gear is ready to go. Okay, so it's almost like there's always a gear kind of connected and ready and queued up. That provides for a lot of efficiencies. It could provide for wear. In some ways, it really depends.
If not done well,
Yeah,
that's where programming and engineering really makes the difference for dual clutch transmissions.
Yeah. Now there are transmissions that are kind of in the middle here, which is the issue we had with Lexus, because Lexus had a transmission that was continuously variable in the sense that it was not tied to this gear ratio and this gear ratio and this gear ratio. It could put any of those together because of the fact that it could smoothly integrate. Okay. However, it was not the dual clutch. I was not a VCT,
a CVT
that we know, which is two cones put together by a belt.
Yeah.
Okay, so
what car is this, if I may ask?
This is a Lexus. This is what was it?
Was it a prototype kind or
no? Well, it was newly launched. So it might have been what's the cool convertible now? The
LC 500.
Yeah, the LC. Okay, when we first launched the LC, that was a discussion point we were having because they had this great transmission, and they were and within their, if you went deep into their technical stuff, which we tend to do, they said it was continuously variable. So like, oh, so is this a CVT? Like, no, it's not. I'm like, but your engineers just said, yeah, but that's the function. In reality, it's anyway. That's what made me realize that we can't be defining things as automatics anymore.
Yeah,
we can't be defining things as CVTs anymore. They can be these hybrids. And one of the early hybrids of this was, do you guys remember the French clutchless transmissions?
Wait. If I'm not mistaken, I drove a Haima like that. I forgot a sequential gearbox, something like that, automatic sequential gearbox, or I forgot the terminology, but I think I've driven one.
Yeah. Okay. It's See, that was an answer to something like that early on. It didn't. It worked really well when you did it well. It was very confusing for most people, including myself. But no. So basically, we're now in the time where the engines are almost you don't think about them anymore in a lot of ways. It's a transmission that you're actually engaging with. It's a transmission that's giving you the feeling of smoothness. It's like Apollo, when you were testing the new inexpensive cars, it was more the transmissions that gave us this feeling, right? Where we would switch modes and so on. And that's kind of our interaction. It's the transmission that helps us interact with the car. I mean, okay, we've been in a pandemic for a year and a half. There are people who are buying cars without testing them. A friend of mine just bought, was just, he was like going, do I go Geely or do I go Honda? And I said, dude, you got to try them. He's like, I don't want to try them. It's a pandemic. Like, they're, just trust me, try them. He did. And he's like, he fell in love with the Geelys, the smoothness, the whatever, the way they built their transmission. I said, these Chinese cars are great. I'm like, wrong. Do not paint them all as Chinese cars. Geely is Geely. They build their car this way. Just like Porsche builds their car this way, you know. And I personally, I think now more than ever, you should be test driving your cars, not because one's going to be good or bad, but because, you know,
it's a
one's going to feel different to
commitment.
you. Yeah.
And it's for me it's like, especially cars nowadays where people hold on to them for at least 3 years, 5 years, and some like for the rest of their lives. I think it's such a big commitment that I really urge people, if you can test drive them, you should.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, that's
Just
something
don't
I
just take our word
realized
for it.
after
Yeah.
like driving cars, like with C, like the feel of the drive, like not even going technical stuff, just the feel
Yes.
of like driving it, the seating position, the way it maneuvers. It's really important to me. So definitely, I agree. It's important to test drive your car.
Okay, so we have done that. We have discussed. The simplest part was actually the manual versus automatic part, which they've decided, and I tend to agree with now, that it's not as important to teach
Yeah.
someone starting up with a manual.
Actually, that
although I
reminds
did
me
enjoy doing it.
also. No, that reminds me also that you can buy commercial trucks now that are automatic, like
Yeah.
the
What?
Isuzus, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
the Travis. One of their selling points now is you can buy it automatic, and and it may sound like, yeah, at first, diba, what? Parang, is it supposed to be manual? But offering those commercial trucks automatic makes it easier to train someone how to drive, and then
yes,
it's
it
it's
does.
less it's like they can spend less time worrying about driving a manual car and more time worrying about their driving a truck. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
hopefully like more commercial trucks go automatic.
yeah. And also the whole idea of the more automated things are, the more integrated their safety systems can be. There was a time when they Porsche engineers were saying that no, we have to go manual because we cannot integrate the traction systems, which allow you to go slip sideways and so on. We can't integrate those into manuals because we need full control. That's actually changed, and you can now. I mean, look at the GT3 RSs and so on. They can integrate it with manuals, as an example, the Hondas Type Rs. They can integrate all that. It's just more expensive and more complicated and so on, but they can. So having these trucks, which are plowing through the night on no end, become increasingly safe is a good thing.
Yeah,
I
I
think,
agree.
yeah. However, it just means that we're doing less behind the wheel.
Which is actually
So
fine in my book.
yeah, it has its points. I mean, are we looking at, are we just being romantic? But okay. Having said that, in this pandemic, I'm driving my
Yamata.
24-year-old Miata, and I love feeling everything. I love
Yeah,
feeling the weight shift. I love feeling
parang
everything.
the romance for driving cars will never die. That's for sure. There'll always be like room for manual simply because
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. Well, they were saying that someone said that the last car ever made will be a sports car, simply because you're not buying it for transportation. You're buying it because of love and
Yes.
that tied to history. This is actually, I was thinking about this with watches the other day, because I was like, okay, I have a watch with a complication that I truly love but never use. Why do I like it? Why is it important to me? It's the same thing with these cars. Why do we have this love affair with these cars? And it's part of it is, for one thing, if you've never had a car or you're a kid starting to be able, tasting freedom, it gets you places.
Yeah, it's that
You
taste of
know,
freedom that
yeah,
cars offer
and
there.
yeah, and Akio Toyota had said, no, we want to get people. You're going to love our cars, but you're going to love them for the reason we loved them in the beginning, which was they allowed us to do things. It's not
Yeah.
because, oh, this is the perfect '65 Chevy, whatever, that touches history. This is what they'll allow us to do. Porsche's answer was, ideally we'd like to be able to have a car that you can drive as you want, but then if you get into an urban setting and you park, you drive up to the restaurant, and then the car parks itself.
Oh, that'd be
And
cool.
like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
But that's why,
But-
like, when people ask me, like, will manual transmissions die? I'm like, no. Simply because there's still that romance for
Yeah.
driving.
they're leaving the mainstream, no question. But the one thing we've seen is with all the modern ways of production and design, people can build at less cost replacement parts now, right? So, and because these are now luxury enthusiast items rather than daily drivers, people will create the gears for old 911 or the part for this or the even like Mazda, for example, is now committing to reproducing all the parts for the original NA. Okay, so you have this wide array of second and third level marketing and manufacturing that will support these cars. Okay, and that's why they will hopefully live on.
Yeah.
Now it's our decision whether or not we teach people how to drive them, and we've all
For
said,
those who want the romance, I guess. Like, for me to boil down if
Well,
they really want. But
yeah,
other than that,
well, yeah. But okay, there is something romantic as well about as taking a curve at night on a racetrack.
oh yeah.
Tapping, having that
yeah.
power automatically.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There's
If it if automatics give you more room to make better driving moves, I'm all for that.
yeah. See, that's not an automatic anymore. That's dual clutch transmission. That's the problem. I mean, that's the problem. It's like calling it an automatic is a disservice. It's not an automatic. It's a sequential. It's like a motorcycle gear, right? That's what people don't realize. It's automatic. That dual clutch system allows you to get the power on quickly. You're not gonna, if you want to wiggle the butt a bit, you can do that, but you don't have to. It can be as smooth as you want or as harsh as you want. Anyway, so we love cars. We love the way whatever we're gonna do with them. So basically, our answer is we don't need to teach them manuals to get started, but it's something they should have in their
They might end up
toolbox.
falling in love with cars also.
That's true too. So there. Okay. So basically, that's our discussion now. I've been outvoted, I guess, which is fine. I actually agree with them. No, you're completely correct.
And vice versa, there's some there are good amount of points that I agree with you, especially with
certainly hope
the
so.
PDKs.
Yeah, but I would rather. I mean, I'm teaching one child learned on automatic, one child learned on a manual, purely because of where the car was parked during the pandemic.
Learning manual on the Miata.
Yeah.
Lucky. Oh
That's
my
fun.
god, that's dude. He'll end up. Oh, your son or your daughter learning on the Miata?
Daughter.
Oh, she'll end up loving cars.
No, and it's purely a function of the Miata wasn't parked in my house during normal times, right? Now that it's in the pandemic, it's parked in my house, so that car is there. May as well use it, right?
Yeah. Oh my god.
So
hard to not fall in love with that car.
Yeah, it is. What can I say? Okay. Anyway, okay, there. So maybe you can fit in one now, Nick. You've lost so much weight.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a whole
okay.
other question.
No.
Okay, never mind.
No,
a whole other question. Okay, so
it's more of a question of height, eh. But I got to drive a NA Miata that was modified for tall people, like last month in around the village. I'm like, oh man, now I want my own.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so we've decided once again that yes, it's not as key to teach people how to drive a manual, but it is useful, and we should have them have it. Plus, it also helps them understand cars a little bit more and hopefully love them. Thank you very, very much, everyone. This has been the Cars Casually Gang Abridged. This has been Paolo. This has been Nick. This has been me, Carl. Thank you very, very much for watching, for listening, for hanging out with us.
See you guys.
Tell us what you do. All right. Thank you very, very much. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Bye. See you.